This is Unsettled, a podcast from Iowa Public Radio, and this season we are minding the gender gap. I'm Charity Nebbe. We have talked about the gender gap in politics, online communities, education, healthcare, and safety. Men and boys are struggling in some important ways that hurt everyone in our society. Boys are being left behind in our educational system, and not only are men more likely to be the victims of violent crime in this country, they are also far more likely to commit those crimes. On this episode, we are going to hear the voices of individuals who identify as men reflecting on what it means to be a man at this moment. And with me now is Cody Howell, a violence prevention expert who works in the areas of men and masculinity at the University of Iowa. Cody, we are going through a difficult and polarizing time. How do you see that affecting men?
I usually interact with a lot of younger men, so college-aged men, and I think that a lot of them are trying to find their place in the world and trying to better understand their own version of manhood in 2025 and what that could mean for them. So I think they're figuring out themselves socially, politically, mentally. I think all of them are trying to find their place in this world, and they're not quite sure where to fit.
And they're getting a lot of messages from a lot of different places, aren't they?
Yeah, everywhere they look, there's a different message. It's different messages from their partners, different messages from the podcasts that they're listening to, different messages on Netflix and Hulu. But there's always something that contradicts one another. And I think that that's the most confusing part is men need to figure out where do they fit and what messages to reject or what messages to internalize.
Throughout this week, we've been exploring different places where there are gender gaps. And in some cases, women or girls lag behind. In some cases, men or boys lag behind. And education is a really big example of that. And a lot of people want to cast it as a battle of the sexes. From your perspective, do you think that we can lift and invest in boys without doing it at the expense of girls?
Absolutely. I think that we can do both. We have the means, we have the power, we have everything to uplift everybody, And I do think that specifically focusing on men helps us to create a better future that we want to see. And by thinking about creating authentic and supportive masculinity, that helps us to create the next generation of supportive and authentic men who raise their kids or raise their communities up. So my hope is that we can do all this at once because we have that sort of power and that sort of interest in that.
What do you think is the greatest risk that faces men today?
I think there's a lot of really great risks. I think that men only hearing one version of what masculinity could be. I think that if we diversify our narratives and if we diversify who gets to have a voice, who gets to be at the table, we can create a better idea of what masculinity could be. And it just doesn't need to be one idea. It could be a whole plethora of ideas that you get to pick and choose from that matches what you think is valuable. And hopefully all of that concludes to a non-violent future that is supportive and wants to treat people with respect, to grow healthy communities, grow healthy children. I just think that there's so many different messages that they're getting right now that we need to be able to say, let's have an idea of what a good, authentic manhood could look like. And it doesn't have to fit the narrative that the podcasts are telling you.
Women have moved into a lot of different arenas thanks to the women's movement, but 60% of elected offices in this country are still held by men. It's hard to reconcile that with seeing boys fall behind. Who is supposed to be watching out for those boys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, there's so many gaps that exist that we can look at those and say, if we want to close these gaps, what would it take? Can we bring men, women, non-binary folks to the table to really just question this and say, if we have a vested interest in closing these gaps, what needs to happen? What are we not doing that could change this conversation? And what action steps would that actually look like? I think we do a lot of talking about what we want and not a lot of action is put behind what needs to happen. We're afraid to have conversations that are tough. We're afraid to have conversations that mean we have to have a critical eye on manhood. And men don't want to be told that what they're doing is potentially harmful. And I think it has to also come from men telling other men that what they're doing causes harm, what they're doing sets us back, what they're doing could create damage long term. We see cycles of violence persist for generations. If we want to break those, it takes men to step up and say, I'm not going to allow this to happen again.
What does it mean to you to be a man in 2025?
Yeah, I love this question because it goes back to authentic masculinity, and I get to define that for myself, and it's always about where I'm at and who I'm with, and that gets to be who I am. With my partner, I get to be goofy and silly, and we get to have a good time. When I'm out in public, I get to be, confident and strong. And I also get to feel the wide range of emotions of like, I'm insecure about certain things, my body, the way I'm aging. All of these things are really important to understanding about manhood and just being able to say, I'm going to feel that fear. I'm going to feel that anxiety about growth. I think that allowing myself to feel that wide range of emotion as a man liberates me from feeling like I'm stuck into one mold and the only way I can respond to that is anger or sadness. I think being a man means I get to be the wide range of emotions and I get to feel that and represent that for all the men around me.
How did you come to this authentic sense of manhood, this authenticity that clearly defines you?
Yeah, I'm lucky that I had a lot of really strong people around me. My dad was a very quiet, very thoughtful man. And that taught me that I didn't need to be loud and out there all the time. I was a theater kid, so, I got to be loud and out there on stage, and I could also be quiet and pensive if I wanted to be. But then I got into my job, and working at the Women's Resource and Action Center taught me that, I can make a change in communities if I listen to women and I uplift the voices of women around me, and that men have a role to play in a safe, nonviolent future. And that was really critical in understanding that men play a role in the world around us. If we want to make change, we can, but that means we work in tandem with the people around us in our communities, our women, our children, our boys and girls. We can do that if we work together. So I just have had so many wonderful people around me, and I feel really changed by that.
Cody Howell, thank you so much.
Of course, my pleasure.
Cody Howell of the University of Iowa. For the rest of the show, we'll hear the voices of Iowans from many different backgrounds as they reflect on what it means to them to be a man in this moment.
My name is George Gagwa. I'm as I like to joke around, made in America. My mother is from Moscow, Russia, and my father's from Sukhumi, what is now known as the Republic of Georgia. I hope to one day become a high school history teacher and just provide my knowledge and the best I can as a human being to other growing human beings in America. A man in 2025 is someone who aspires and strives to become a great father and a great husband. And the path that is put before him to achieve those two goals is filled with opportunities for men to become worthful and useful, to learn to become worthful and useful. And I use those two specific words because in a lot of studies done regarding suicide and men, what they found is the two most used words by men who, right before they commit suicide, is useless and worthless. As I mentioned before, I'm an education major as well. And one gap that I do experience is the amount of women and men going to college. So 50 years ago, the gap between men and women going to college was 13%. Today it's 15%, but it's flipped. Now there's more women going to college than there are men. And by God, I do not mean that this is terrible, that, oh my God, women are getting educated. No. I hate people who just decide to attack women for deciding to, of their own free agency, to go and get educated. No, what I'm talking about is whatever we're doing for women, setting up these female role models, providing the quality resources in order to achieve a successful quality education for women. I believe we should ought to apply that to men, and in the sense that in America for a long time we've preached the idea that everyone can be successful and equality. So if equality is for some people for not but not for others, then that doesn't work that way. A lot of us are trapped in this narcissist pool myth where we've convinced ourselves that we see an image that we want to believe is our own image of what it means to be a man, right? You have, like, for example, Andrew Tate selling what it is to be a man and all that, pardon my French, BS and so forth. But and so we've a lot of men convince themselves when they can just be a man from what other people sell as an advertisement on social media, and then they just purchase it and, oh great, I'm a man now. It doesn't work that way. So that's the first struggle, looking out, finding people who you can credibly trust that can be the role model for you as a man for you to grow into a better man and so forth, or what it means to be a man. And from speaking from my perspective on my mother and what she's done with me and for me and everything else, I can say that, I want men to find women who are as awesome and as loving and as supportive as my mom, and I'm grateful to God that I found that in my girlfriend today. A lot of times when men are told to share our feelings, it's met with a very interesting response, because first I mentioned that we want to find someone that we love and we can share the beauty of love with, in the sense that we can actually talk to that person. My girlfriend can tell you, if she was on here right now, how many times I've actually been open up with her about some of the things that were on my mind, whether I was actually struggling with anything or not. Just having someone to talk to, is that in the fact that she's just such a beautiful human being as she is, she was able to listen to me. I'm not convinced many of these men are willing to put themselves in a position to ask for help, ask for someone to just listen to them, or even be there to listen to someone.
I'm not content, for I am lonesome. I don't love to work, but I will provide. And I'm tired of TV dinners with no one by my side.
This is Unsettled from IPR News. This is Unsettled from IPR News. I'm Charity Nebbe. On today's episode, we're listening to the voices of individuals who identify as men, reflecting on what it means to them to be a man at this moment.
My name is Abraham L. Funches, Jr., and currently I serve as pastor of Jubilee UMC Freedom Center in the city of Waterloo. I also double up as executive director of Waterloo Human Rights Commission, but I'm happy to be here today. I think what it means to be a man in 2025 has everything to do with learning how to guide, protect, leading with wisdom, taking care of one's family. For me, being a pastor, the idea of exercising moral responsibility, having the courage to identify right from wrong, and being able to stand on that with enough moral conviction to at least speak out in the presence of wrong. I had two strong male figures in my life. One was my father, and then the other was my uncle. My father was a Christian, and my uncle was an atheist. And so what I learned from my father in particular was, some of the things that I probably mentioned already. And quite frankly, I learned those things from my uncle as well. My father, of course, influenced me a little bit more in the religious direction, and the idea of having, moral fiber, character, to be able to respect, especially elders, but to respect everyone, with my understanding that this nation was founded on violence, cruelty, exploitation, etc. One begins to appreciate that manhood, especially black manhood, could be determined in part by one's ability to survive the racist onslaught that sometimes comes our way, especially in light of a lack of legal protection, economic exploitation, lack of patriarchal authority, perhaps in families. Well, quite frankly, you appreciate even more those who mentored you when you began to understand for yourself the historicity of racism and that impact, quite frankly, on men, black men in particular, growing up in the U.S. of A. We seem to have been moving away from a core set of values that we used when we were growing up. And so it's a generational difference, I think, that we're seeing. And I wish that we had a better way of, trying to share some of those. I've tried, certainly. I wrote a love letter to young people in a little book called Rise. And in that book, I was trying to share what I thought were some of those bedrock values with respect to rising early, with respect to respecting your elders, with respect to reading everything you can get your hands on, with respect to taking the initiative to engage in certain chores inside the house and outside of the house, and the idea of understanding the Bible as a sacred text that has nuggets of wisdom in it to help guide one's life. Toxic masculinity certainly has its price, and I think more and more today people are exercising, or men are exercising a greater degree of emotional intelligence, also express the need to seek help, which is far different from the way I was raised in my generation. Yeah, that definitely gives me hope for the future. I'm excited that we are changing and we are evolving and we are listening more. One theologian said the first duty of love is to listen. And so emotional intelligence suggests that we're listening more, and that's always a great thing.
You know, there was a time when if someone told you to do something, you did it. Bam, right on, no questions asked. It was yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. You never said no, you know? But you know, things are changing nowadays. It's a new day, baby.
My name is Chuy Renteria. I'm an author and a dancer. I'm the arts editor for Little Village magazine. I identify, my pronouns are he, they. Grew up here in Iowa. To be a man in 2025 is an experience of, I think, really thinking about trying to come to terms with a lot of the ways that me and other men like me have been raised, thinking about the future and my own daughter and daughters, how I'm raising them in the context of everything else that's going on in 2025, right? And a lot of it is trying to, unlearn some of these things that have been, beaten into me as a boy. Things that are really ingrained in our societies, the way that we look at expression in men, especially in American culture, of this like stoic, you keep everything in, you bottle everything in, you don't express, you be strong, you be like the strong silent type, right? So like getting away from that has been a really fascinating and hard experience, to be frank. Yeah. I can think of a lot of ways that I've been, pressured to act a certain way as a boy, as a man growing up, right? I mean, I remember adults that should have been, supporters, that should have been caregivers in my life, who would, I'll be really frank, that screamed at me for crying, for expressing hurt and pain, right? Physical pain, but also like, to be upset, right? Like, you don't do that. It's not manly to react that way, right? And it gets tied into like homophobia as well, in my experience, right? It's a certain type of person that reacts this way. It's a certain type of man that reacts this way, right? And it's this kind of like invalidation of that as well. Like, you are not a man if you react this way, right? It was I think a really profound, lasting thing that I have to unlearn as I go. I think the ways that I see, gender divides and gaps. I mean, it's in the workplace. In my experience, it's been in the workplace. It's been in my career trajectory. I think we've all been in those meetings where a woman will say will add something to it and it gets glossed over, and then I've seen it, I've called it out, right? And I'm sure I've done it as well, where like the man repeats in a different way what the woman said, and people are like, that's a great point, right? And it's just, yeah, I've like I said, I've probably done it, but I've definitely seen it. There's men that I've called it out on who didn't even, I could say they really didn't even realize that they were doing it, right? Which in a way is kind of a cop out, right? Because it's like, no, you do, right? You do realize you're doing this. You just haven't had somebody call it out. I look at my hometown that I grew up in, West Liberty, and I look at some of the, because I've gone and visited and done work with junior high school students, and I see the articulation and expression in these boys and these men and the community as a whole, and how it's so much more nuanced than what it was for me growing up. So yeah, there's hope. There's also a lot of, it's a challenge.
Hey, my name is Raman Borsellino. I am from Des Moines, Iowa. I grew up the child of journalists, and I am now a comedy writer in Los Angeles, California. To be a man in 2025 it's obviously a position of privilege, right? Men seem to control pretty much every facet of at least this country right now. The most listened to podcasts are the ones on the right, from Joe Rogan and, sort of these men's rights activists. The country are run by men, and they're driving out women under the guise of DEI. Fox News is the most watched news program. Obviously, these are political things, but I think they can't be untangled from masculinity and maleness. I think to be a man right now is to be in a position of power. If I'm being 100% honest, I think, and this is not to sound as though I got it, quote unquote, early on, but I think I have always had a decent sense of what it means to be a man and what masculinity means. And I have not always thought of it as necessarily an incredible thing, in that while we are certainly quote unquote in charge, we are kind of, not always using our positions of power for good things. And I say that I've had this understanding for a while because I was, raised by feminists. My mom is, Rekha Basu, is really one of Des Moines' most outspoken feminists. My late father, Rob Borsellino, I learned very early on how many women friends he had and how much women were a part of his life and our family's lives. And so I think for my entire life, I've been aware of what masculinity means. And so now to see sort of toxic masculinity wreak havoc on society and on the world, it's a shame. I lost my dad at age 16, which meant that, I guess at some point when I hit age 32, yeah, I'm aging myself, whoops, I realized that I had lived more of my life without my dad than with my dad. And with that means that the primary role model in my life, my parent, had been my mom. So that is to say that at this point in my life, I have had my mom's influence over me more than anyone else. And given her position as a feminist and her, politics and views, I think that's really rubbed off on me. But when my dad passed away, I learned to really sort of rely on other people. And, my dad lost his father when he was, I want to say, 6 years old. And he told me that the community was telling him, you need to be strong now. You need to be the man of the household. You need to take care of your mother. It's not okay to show weakness. It's not okay to cry. You need to step it up. And I think, for one, he did not want my brother and I to ever feel a trace of that when we were growing up, even when he was alive and well. And then when he passed, it was very much the opposite of that. It was being able to rely on women and other role models and other figures around us. And I was 16, I was able to still be a kid in many ways. I didn't feel this need to be a man. And at his funeral, to be crying publicly in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, clearly I had no qualms with how quote unquote masculine I was viewed. Of course, my dad dying was an absolute tragedy, but when I look back at the things that have shaped me, I think it has had a sort of a happy ending. I didn't go into some rage and get pissed off at the world. I think I was really able to embrace love around those around me, and that's not unrelated to masculinity.
Hello, my name is JJ Kapoor, and I am a 25-year-old Sikh man. And I should just clarify, when I say Sikh, it is S-I-K-H, which is my faith. I promise you, I am not contagious. I never thought I would look like my father. Like now when I look at myself in the mirror, I have this beard and I have this turban, and I always thought I looked like my mom, to be honest, until now. I think my father was always worried, living in a post 9/11 Iowa, that I would one day look like him, and that the discrimination, the xenophobia, the harassment he experienced as a Sikh American at a time when Sikhs and Muslims were really the bad guys, I think he wanted to shield and protect me from that before I now looked the way that I do. But now I don't think he can. The good news is I'm a man and I'm an adult, and ideally I can shield myself from discrimination that sadly exists. I have always felt like a very girly guy. I always loved the Bee Gees because of their masculine falsetto, I don't know. I just always have felt connected to the feminine parts of my existence. I think gender is a performance, and I think performing masculinity is something I've found myself really grappling with and struggling with on dating apps. Someone has a literal second to swipe right or left depending on whether they feel attraction to someone. And when you have a turban and a beard and just don't look like the stereotypical Iowa man or attractive Iowa man, I think people like me tend to get left out of the equation or tend to not be given a chance, a fair chance. And so I think what I end up doing is compensating for these very physical parts of my identity by trying to prove my worthiness or that I'm worthy of love. Sometimes I think it comes in the form of cracking self-deprecating jokes on an app. Right now, the joke that I have is, my name is JJ, I wear a turban, old white ladies are scared of me. I know that's not true because I actually am very close friends with a lot of old white ladies. But I feel like I need to poke fun at parts of my existence to be an attractive man. I feel that the masculine label limits the ways in which I can just be myself sometimes and express myself. If I want to paint my nails purple, why is that an issue? Why does that make me less of a man? Why can't that actually be a part of my manhood? So it's frustrating to me. If I want to put my hair down instead of wear a turban, there are expectations around my Sikh faith of what a man is supposed to look like that we have to hide, I think, a part of our feminine identity. Hot take, not for the Western audience, but for the Sikh audience. But it's true. My primary male role model is my father. And I think it's because he's actually a really sensitive, emotional human being. 3 years ago, I came back home from college during the pandemic. And I was going through a really hard breakup at that time. And I had to move back in with my parents. And there was this moment when I just couldn't fall asleep at night. And so I asked my father to come sleep next to me. And he just intuitively knew I couldn't fall asleep. and he pat my head to the rhythm of this Sikh prayer, and it goes like, Satnam, Satnam, Satnam. And I just feel like he has always let me be my most authentic self as a man and as a boy.
This is Unsettled from IPR News.
Curious what's happening here in Iowa? Wondering what's going on in the rest of the world? Feed your curiosity with IPR, where every day you can expect to hear something unexpected. Iowa Public Radio, news, music, and culture for the curious.
This is Unsettled from IPR News. I'm Charity Nebbe. On today's episode, we are hearing from men as they reflect on what it means to be a man at this moment.
Okay, I'm Bill McAnally from Fort Dodge. I'm a retired building contractor, educator at a community college, and now I'm just enjoying retirement and spending a lot of time with my grandkids.
I'm Kevin Nordmeyer. I'm an architect in Des Moines, Iowa, and a native Iowan, and father of 3 boys, and a wife who's an elementary school teacher. What it means for me to be a man in 2025, it's changed for me over time. The roles I play as an architect in projects across Iowa predominantly kind of define who I am as a man. That's kind of evolved over time because I have multiple sclerosis. As my disability has progressed, my sort of image of myself and maybe what others see of me kind of changes. And so my view of manhood is different today because I feel in many times I'm not as respected isn't the right word, but less understood as I used to be.
Since I was raised in the 60s and 70s, I think I was able to pull some of the values that we had back in those days where it was, accountability, being selfless, always trying to help others. But since I was also really nurtured really well by my parents, my mother was very predominant in my life. She would come to everything that I ever did. Since I had daughters, I kind of gravitated as I got older to become more of kind of that feeling of, my daughters can do anything. I don't care what anybody says, and they proved this out, of course. And to have the same values that we had hoped to be carrying on to our grandkids, and it has. I even see my grandsons. I have one granddaughter. I see my grandsons very protective of my granddaughter, and that's just something that I like to see. I've always kind of visualized protective. I don't know why it is, but I seem to be awful protective of others sometimes. And so that's kind of what I see myself as.
Middle school and high school is obviously for all of us, it's a very strange time in many ways. And I think the pressures of learning what it is to be a man in middle school and high school can be pretty daunting at times. And so the pressures that classmates put on you or other people put on you, and it can be overwhelming. And I think role models play a big part. My family was pretty similar in northern rural Iowa, pretty strong family in terms of the support that my parents gave me and instilled in me that, you can do anything and just go for anything that you feel you're good at. So in high school, I felt empowered to not only try to be with my friends in the sports, but also be with my friends in speech and drama and band and so forth. And so living in rural Iowa allowed me to explore all of those things as a young man. And so empathy related to that is one of also trying to empathize with as many people as you possibly can. I think it's a key role for what a man should be in 2025 today. the challenges I see in young men today is being able to step back and empathize and understand what other people are feeling, and not just succumb to what social media says that you should be doing, but really reflecting upon how should I be acting to be a good human being, to treat people equally and to empathize with others. I think is a big challenge right now with all the pressures that we have upon young men.
I agree completely with what Kevin is saying, and since I'm quite a bit older than Kevin, I kind of look back at what I see some of them. I feel kind of a lack of appreciation of the people before them, especially ones that were in military conflicts, what they had possibly given up. And sometimes I see that the biggest thing in their life is their batteries aren't charged in their phone, but it's just hard for them, I think, especially when they deal so much with social media, is identifying the things that they really should be focused on, really should be concerned about. But and then there is a lot of lack of, I think, respect for others. It's just a little tough. I think they need a lot more role models, and some that are, someone like, I hate to make Kevin blush, which I can't see him on the radio blush, but they need to follow someone, like Kevin, what he's done, what he goes through, how successful he is, and what a great person and role model he is. I consider him a personal mentor because he's helped me all the way through the years too, and it's just such a great individual. I think it would really help if people were to get education and personal time with someone that really knows the things that are true and right. Someone like Kevin. So that's kind of the way I feel about it. When you get into your 70s, I think it really shows who the people are that you truly respect, who you revere, who you want to take ideas from, and you don't have anything to prove anymore. You don't have to have someone's validation anymore. As long as what you do is for friends and family, and they value you, just your friends and family, that's all you can ask for at the end of your days.
What I value in friendships, particularly with Bill and others that I have, but with Bill, is that I know Bill isn't going to judge me, and I think that's what's critical to male friendships. What he's saying about really we need to get where people are respecting one another again, which is completely seems to be gone in many respects today in our lives. But what I would say is, in Bill, the other thing I respect in him is his kindness, and he really has an engaging personality in terms of his ability to relate to anyone and to not talk down to people and to treat people with respect. And so I think that's what I value in the friendship I have with Bill, and it's what everybody should be able to have in someone, is that level of respect and kindness and non-judgmental friendship.
Yeah, that's good. That's about as mushy as Kevin and I've ever been. So yeah. How about those Packers?
Yeah,
Friends sing together, la 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 la. Friends do things together, la 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 la. Friends laugh together, ha 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 ha. Friends make graphs together.
My name is Evander Ellsbury. I am a trans man, and I'm also a musician and have worked in caregiving for the last 10 plus years. Being a man in 2025 to me means being an example for my fellow men. I'd like to focus on creating and fostering safe environments and conversations, that promote taking good care of our mental health, lifting each other up, and keeping our own toxic masculinity in check. I think the idea that we as men in society, the idea that we always have to be strong, is extremely outdated and toxic in itself. So I always strive to help my fellow men remember our softer side and letting them know that it's okay to feel emotions. And when we name our emotions, they can no longer have power over us. So toxic masculinity is harmful beliefs and behaviors that are instilled in us from a young age, of traditional values that males are supposed to be aggressive and dominant and demeaning to all people, all genders, and, engaging in behaviors that are otherwise harmful, sometimes without knowing it, without knowing better. As a trans man, and, specifically in our times, current times, I feel like my manhood personally has felt very visible and, attacked. And when I say invisible, I mean like we're not seen as real men, right? At least by like cisgendered males. But, I'm not any less of a man because I'm trans. And I see this thought going around a lot lately, like we're asking for some special treatment or something. And the reality is I'm not asking for any special treatment. I just want to exist in what's left of the quote free world, right? And I think that real men protect and fight for the rights of all living beings, not just some. We share the weight of the world with each other and don't just hold it on our shoulders alone. That idea is not rooted in community, So fighting the good fight and being a good man, I feel like that's what that's all about. When I think of the pressure from society on me as a trans man, my mind automatically goes to passing, right? Passing or living in stealth as a trans man, being validated and not misgendered and passing. And while I'm talking about that, I want to say that, like, you absolutely 100% do not have to pass to be trans or non-binary. You are valid in every stage of your journey, and passing is extremely validating. But also, as someone who has spent a lot of his life in the wrong body and presenting in the wrong body as a woman, I have a pretty unique perspective, seeing how I was treated before my transition and how I am treated now, especially when it comes to being treated more fairly as a trans person because I pass rather than someone who doesn't pass. My father passed away 10 years ago on June 1st, and he was a very selfless man, and he taught me how to be that way. He also taught me how to not be that way. He died very young. A lot of that was due to stress and him not taking care of himself in the way that he needed to. And I feel like that's more important now in my life and in this world than ever. So, the lessons that he continues to teach me from beyond the grave are sometimes indescribable, right? But when I learn to pay attention to the signs, I see them very clearly. And now that I'm getting to know the man in myself, I get to know him better too.
Andre Wright, Executive Director of Wright House of Fashion and founder of Wright House of Fashion and co-founder of Humanize My Hoodie. For me, to be a man in 2025, it means being true to myself, being authentic, having a good set of core values that guide me in all my decision making. I also think in 2025, being a man means being vulnerable, showing sides of myself that people can feel like they have a connection to. It doesn't necessarily mean having to show all my masculinity in every aspect of my life. It means being confident in who I am. My idea of manhood has changed over time because when I was younger, we were told that we couldn't cry. I even think that there were songs made like Macho Man or something like that. And it was this whole idea about being macho and being tough and being, playing sports and doing all those things. But I think as I got older and as I think about man these days, I mentioned it earlier, it's more about How can I be a man and still cry and be vulnerable and share more of myself with the world versus like show no emotion, show no feelings, no show. I think that idea of manhood is kind of out the window, and it's like I think more people, or what I've seen is that men wear pink now. Like we wouldn't wear pink back in the day, but now we wear pink and stuff like that. So I think it's just being a lot more vulnerable and being open to all things. I think it's growth and experience, and the things that we experience as men allow us to truly become who we are. And I think it's different for everybody, but I think for me, it's possibly just having kids, just having 3 beautiful kids of my own and seeing them walk through life and understanding that maybe some of the things that I was taught when I was growing up aren't pertinent to today's society. When I think about young men today, my worries come from really just them not having a clear understanding of who they are, and them not digging inside and really understanding that they can be the best thing ever if they just have some patience with themselves, and everything's not immediately going to happen for them, and they just have to wait a little bit. And I think social media has kind of gotten in the way of that, because you see somebody doing something, so you want it just as fast, but we didn't have all those tools, so we knew we had to wait, or we didn't get a chance to experience or see all those things, so we knew that something was coming to fruition. So my thing that I fear is that maybe our young men aren't as patient, and they're expecting things to immediately happen for them. But I feel like if they can see the tenure in their life and know that things happen sometimes later in life, that they'll be okay. What I see from young people that gives me hope for the future is that I see them excited when they learn something new. So if they learn a new skill, if they learn how to do something that they hadn't learned before, that really brings me a lot of excitement, because I do get a chance to experience that from a lot of youth. And I also believe that the attitudes of young people aren't based on like the society being depressed. I think they've created their own culture, and we just have to kind of adapt to it. So what gets me excited is that they've created their own type of cultures and vibes different than when we were younger, and we sometimes as adults don't understand it. And so I get excited, and it gives me hope to know that the world will change. And when we see kids and youth, we are actually looking at the gift horses right in their face. And so we just need to be more supportive of their new ideas and their new movements.
Unsettled is a production of IPR News. Our producers are Samantha McIntosh, Danny Gear, and Caitlin Troutman. Our digital producer is Natalie Dunlap. We had production assistance from Maddie Willis. Our executive producer is Katherine Perkins, and we get technical support from IPR Broadcast Operations. I'm Charity Nebbe.